Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Smith, Executive Director here at the Arc of Greater Prince William. We're very honored to have you a part of us this Saturday. We'll wait just a few minutes because we can see people are starting to come on. And so we'll give it 2 more minutes and then we're going to get started. This is a dumb question, but can 2 people come on at one time? No.
People will funnel in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes after.
Typical, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Ed, when you start the share screen,
I can do it when he's, yeah. We'll just need to throw the question out, Ronnie, when we start the screen sharing, just make sure, hey, can everybody see the screen?
Okay.
And if I see any negatives on there. And Kayla's connected to the same meeting, so. Kayla, if you can hear me, once we start sharing the screen, Ronnie's just gonna make a comment of, can everybody see the screen? I want you, if you could, if there's anything wrong, just kind of chime in verbally, that way we'll know that something's not right.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started on our conference. Circle of Support Conference. That's in our 26th year, believe it or not. And this is the most unusual conference we've had. I'm Karen Smith, the Executive Director here at the Arc of Greater Prince William. And we are so happy to be together once again. Last year, we could not do this conference because of the pandemic. This year, we were hopeful that we were going to once again be all together. And unfortunately, that did not happen because we're still in the midst of our pandemic. But hopefully next year, we will all be together. Although we wish we could be here, today is going to be a great day. Once the speaker is over, and we're so excited to welcome Ronnie in his role. He has done some workshops for us. He's also been at the Circle Support Conference before. And so after he is finished at around 12:30, you'll be able to click on the workshops. And we have a vast variety of workshops today offered, but you can see them besides today because we're going to have them available up on the website for close to 2 months, probably till the end of the calendar year. And at your leisure, you can go in there and select what you want. If you saw a really good one that you want to repeat, you can view it again, but you can review all of them. And one of the things that we could not have done is this conference without our donors and our exhibitors. And we hope that you will go to our website at ARC-GPW and click on the Circle Support Conference, and you'll be able to see the scroll of our various exhibitors that we have. You just have to push the button and it'll take you right to their website. And we thank you because these people who are exhibitors are people who support individuals with disabilities. And they have been offering their service, most of them, for several years, and they're good partners of the Arc of Greater Prince William. This conference could not be possible without the hardworking person of someone who does not like to come into the spotlight, and that is Jan Russell. Jan Russell is our coordinator for Family Support Services. She has worked here at the Arc for over 20 years. 25 years, she just reminded me. So how soon we forget, because I've been here for decades too, and it seems so short because of what we do and the passion that we have for what we are. Jan has put together this program this year, but she also has things going on throughout the year, several workshops, all sorts of information and referral things. So when you get a chance, say hello to her. And also if you have problems or concerns or need information, she's the best one here at the ARC to help you navigate through systems. Once our speaker has finished, as I said, we will go to our workshops. We are also going to be sending out a survey, and you will be getting a certificate of attendance that will be emailed after this conference. This conference was brought free this year. Normally, our conference is very reasonable, but this year it is free. And so when you think about your year-end donations to charity, please include family support at the ARC as perhaps one of the places that you might like to donate. We guarantee the dollars that are donated to the ARC are used where you specify, and also we try our very best to be good stewards of the money entrusted in us. We have a long history, over 57 years, and we hope to continue that with programs and innovative services. And family support services is one that we feel committed to because there's not enough information out there for families to support them. But at this time, I'm really excited because we have someone that has been a friend for the ARC, as I said, for a number of years. But he is going to be able to share his story, and the short story even got a little bit richer this year. Ronnie Snyder is a licensed clinical social worker. He is an author, he's a publisher, he's a therapist, he's a speaker, and he's a business owner. But this week, he also added to his resume running for the Board of County Supervisor where he lives. And unfortunately, he lost by 250 votes. And he was willing to share that with all of us, but he pledges that 4 years from now, he plans to do it again. And we certainly wish him well. Ronnie's from Tappahannock, Virginia. And in 3rd grade, he was diagnosed with learning disabilities and spent 7 years in the special education system there. His early academic challenges ignited a passion with him to pursue social justice and to work with youth. Mr. Sidney is a 2014 graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University School of Social Work, and he has a master's degree from them. In 2015, he released Amazon's bestseller, Nelson Beats the Odds, a semi-autobiographical comic book about a young man who struggles with the shame of being placed in special education, and offers a look into the African-American male experience in special education. He went on to self-publish Tanika's New Dress, Rest in Peace, Rashawn Reloaded, Educator's Guide to Nelson Beats the Odds series, and Nelson Beats the Odds Activity Guide. In 2015, Ronnie helped develop the Nelson Beats the Odds comic creator self-esteem app. And Ronnie, we welcome you once again to the ARC and look forward to hearing you as our main speaker at Circle Support. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I just wanted to do a quick check-in so if someone can raise their thumb or make a comment. You can see the presentation is entitled The Power of Connecting with One Caring Adult. All right, so we're good to go. So I'm very happy to be here, and also very happy to be considered a friend of the ARC. This is before the pandemic. I had attended the ARC's conference and other workshops for several years. Jan has been almost like we've become friends over the years, and also Rhonda, she's been supportive and given me opportunities to share my book and to also share my story with participants. So I'm really happy to be here today. Sorry we can't be face to face. But, you know, we are here. This presentation hopefully will be informative to you. I'm coming from the position of a former special education student, also a therapist, also someone who's been all over the country talking to parents, talking to kids with disabilities, talking to administrators. I see myself as an advocate, someone who has the experience, who wants children, you know, going through the school system right now to have a better experience. So this presentation is sort of a cumulative presentation that just discusses various things, and hopefully you'll find some benefit in it. So we'll get started. Okay. All right. I don't know how many of you all have heard of Rita Pearson. She has some YouTube videos. She has a wonderful TED Talk. And I wanted this presentation to be about championing because for me, the champions in my life are the reasons why I'm able to run for the board of supervisors, why I graduated college, why I even finished high school, and why I even have, dreams to be even more than what I am today. So she has a quote that says, "Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best they can possibly be." And for students with disabilities, we need champions. Sometimes we don't always have the best self-esteem or the best self-worth. Sometimes we're just trying to figure out our identity. We have to deal with people in our life who don't always believe in us. So having a champion, someone who encourages us, who understands and believes in us, it can give us that momentum and that inspiration to try a little bit harder. So the two people in my life who were the two groups of people in my life who were very instrumental for me were my parents and also several teachers. So I'm going to get up because I do want to point to a few pages, but at the top, that's a picture of me, my mother, my father, and also holding my daughter. And as an adult now, as a father, I do see a little bit what my parents were going through. I remember asking my dad before I published my book, I was like, what did you do to help me get over that hump and, to want to be a better student? And, or what did you try? Because I wanted to share that with families. And he said, nothing really worked. Whatever he did or whatever my parents did, they just tried everything. It didn't work. And it gave me that realization that sometimes, parents can try to do everything, teachers can try to do everything, but it's not until it clicks with that child, with that student, that they're able to get over that hump. So, for me, I wanted to share my family's experience because it may be similar to a lot of the parents who are, watching this presentation's experience. And for me, graduating college was one of the highest achievements in my life because I had a teacher tell me in 8th grade, that I wouldn't go to college. I felt that throughout my whole, educational career, that there were teachers and adults and students who didn't believe that I would be, successful educationally. And there were several years where I didn't believe it within myself. So to get that achievement, to graduate with my bachelor's degree, and then go back and earn my master's degree, was me also conquering those sharks, which we call them in therapy, those negative voices inside of your head tell you that you can't do it, those pre-recordings of what you hear from other people, that self-doubt. And I really wanted to overcome that because it was always something that I seen as an impediment. I didn't like to try a lot of things as a kid because I didn't do well in a lot of other areas, and it sort of, caused me to retreat within myself. So I wanted to just talk about a few pages within my book because I think it's something that can really relate to a lot of parents. So one page, this is the page when I get into special education from Nelson Beats to Oz, and it says, my mother said, "There's nothing wrong with you, baby. You just need some extra help." And Nelson said, "It's not fair. I won't be in class with my friends and everyone will think I'm slow." My mother says, "You're not slow. I've always told you that you were smart. Your dad and I just want the best for you, and the school thinks this program will help." So this page to me is important because, you see the mother embracing that son. For me, I thought that I was smart. I believed that I was smart. But the stigma of special education is that if you get into this service, that other people don't think that you're smart or that you're not good enough or smart enough to compete with the other students in your classroom. So for me, growing up, I saw sometimes special education as something that was other. I felt like other, different than my peers, not as smart as my peers, not as organized as my peers. But I did have my parents, support me and lift me up. And my mother used to always affirm and say, and tell me that I was smart. And she always made me feel like I was smart. And I feel like that was sort of the shield that helped me get through school and not feel like I was dumb or feel like I was any different than the other kids. And sometimes parents have to provide that affirmation, that reinforcement, because when the kid goes into that school, goes into that special education classroom, there's so many different things and people and experiences that may make them feel other. So this page is about when I was in high school. When I went into high school, and from 7th grade, I wanted to take classes with my friends, because for me, being with my friends was really important. And these were the days before inclusive education, where a lot of special education students spent time in the inclusion room. And our inclusion room was away from the other students. It was in middle school, it was a classroom that almost looked like a janitor's closet. In the high school, it was in a classroom that was sort of an annex from the school, where they had shop class, mechanics class, art class, and it wasn't situated around the other classrooms like your English and your math. And when I went to high school, I was in classes with my friends, but during the middle of the day, my guidance counselor calls me out of the classroom and says that, we want to make the schedule change. And I was kind of shocked. I was shocked I was in the class with my friends and not in the special education classes. But then when she called me, not only did she take me out of those classes, but she put me in a self-contained special education room. When in middle school, I only went to special education for a resource period. So, for me, it was almost like a punch in the gut, because it was such a extreme, change. And I like this page because my parents, they were advocates, for me. My mother, she was a very strong-willed person. And she always had this idea that the school was putting African-American kids in special education so they can make money off of them. And that was something that she really believed, is that some educators were targeting certain kids, so they can make money. But my father, on the other hand, he was more, I would say he was more considerate toward what the schools were offering. He saw that I had some challenges, and he knew that I needed some additional support. So my parents kind of came from two different schools, and it may be something that as parents, you all may have those conversations, in your home, where you may have a parent who feels, special education stigmatizing, and a parent who feels like the kid needs that support. But in the next page, it's me coming home. So when you read Nelson Beats the Eyes, you see sort of the emotional side of it. And I really wanted to make my story emotional, because a lot of times we don't really check in with our kids to see what their experiences are like, whether it's in regular school or in special education. And for me, for so long, I tried to hide that I was in special education. So I would go to class really early. I would leave class a little late so my friends wouldn't see me going to that class. And I spent so much time trying to keep what I was going through privately and secretly that I wasn't able to focus and concentrate on the things that I needed to concentrate on. So this page is after I come back home. When I was writing a book, I asked my dad about my experience. I said, do you remember that time when, they tried to put me in a self-contained special education class, and, how I reacted? And he said he said I came home and I cried like a baby. So I included that page in the book. I don't remember crying like a baby, but I'm still very triggered thinking about that experience. And going through special education, a lot of times, and your kids or your students may feel like this, you feel like you're the only person in the world going through what you're going through. I didn't talk to other kids in the special education class about what was going on. I never really talked to them about anything. And everybody kind of sits sometimes in their own silos, where they don't discuss what they're going through with their peers. They don't discuss what they're going through with their parents. They don't discuss what they're going through with their teachers. And that's one thing my special education teacher said, is that she wished she would have known. And later on, and I'll show you some pictures of, there's a ninja comic page in the book. And my special education teacher said that she had no idea I was carrying around that stigma. But she did notice that I was coming to class late and early, but she never said anything. And sometimes I appreciate that. And sometimes kids will do different things to kind of shield themselves. And, teachers sometimes can address it, sometimes they don't. And it is sort of a tricky thing, but I will err on the side of addressing it. Sometimes that elephant in the room needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about, because a lot of times kids won't come to adults with issues. Sometimes adults have to ask the right questions or position themselves in the right way to get those types of responses. I think you can go to the next slide. So what parents can do. So I wanted to generate this particular slide just to give parents just some tips, just based on my own experience, and also some experiences from kids and families I've talked to throughout this process. So one is believing your child's ability to overcome adversity. Your child is not fragile. Your child is not made of glass. And I think for me, I needed to experience some type of I need to experience adversity in order for me to become who I am today. In therapy, there's a worksheet that I came in contact with that talks about the butterfly and how while they're in the cocoon, they have to move around and wiggle and do all of these different things. But in that process, they're developing and they're growing into that butterfly. And I think sometimes, parents, because parents are so protective, and even as a parent now, I want to protect my kids. But also, we have to allow them to experience some adversity, because for me, adversity, made me stronger. And when I say hold your child accountable while holding their hand, the adversity is going to be strong and harder for some kids than others, but it's important for you to be supportive. When I say hold your hand, that doesn't mean, do everything for your child, but also the accountability piece is important, because it's one thing I learned going through the system is I learned how to get around various things. I learned how to manipulate people and manipulate positions and manipulate processes to not have to do as much work or to, get a grade without putting in the effort. So it's really important that as parents, as teachers, adults, that you challenge, those students to do a little bit more, to do a little better. Because if I always think about learning disabilities. Sometimes disabilities in itself having a disability isn't a crutch. For me, the crutch is when people feel sorry for someone, or when a person, feels sorry for themselves and they don't work up to the highest potential that they can. So, I never see having a disability as a crutch. It's not, but it's that crutches when people don't push. And I've had teachers that, essentially did the work for the students when the students were very much capable of doing the work themselves. So, you believe in their ability to overcome, but also be supportive, but don't do the work for them. Find creative ways to connect what they love with what they learn. That's what's important to me, because I didn't find a lot of educational classes in school very inspiring, but I love to write poetry. I love to do, hip hop writings. And I had an English teacher that allowed us to write a rap around, I think it was like Shakespeare. And I just watched Hamilton live in Philadelphia, and it was probably the most, I was listening to the Hamilton soundtrack on the way here. But, I didn't really like theater as a kid, but when I saw a theater program that implemented hip hop, it gave me a different perspective on it, and I enjoyed it. So if your kid is into, whatever, trains or dinosaurs or engineering or music, find a way to connect it to, what they learn and make those two things relevant. Also, establishing a healthy student-parent-teacher collaboration is important. And I put student first for a reason. A lot of times when I was going through school, I asked my dad, I said, was I present at these IEP meetings? And he said I wasn't. I have been very active also in the I'm Determined program, which hopefully every parent, every teacher, and every student has access to that program, or at least to the resources on the website. But they do a really good job teaching kids how to self-determine, teaching children about what their disability is, teaching children how to advocate for themselves, teaching children how to be the one who leads that IEP meeting instead of being on the receiving end. And I think that's extremely important. I mean, I've gone to schools and asked, students, what is your disability? Why are you in special education? A lot of them don't know why, or they can't explain it. And I think that's a disservice, to the kids. For me, I was always the one who wanted to push the limits. I wanted to take the harder classes. I wanted to challenge myself. And, in the school situation I was in, a lot of times kids that were in special education, they wouldn't give them those foreign language classes, or they wouldn't give them the harder math class or the harder English class because they didn't believe they could do it. But if a kid wants to take a more advanced class or a more difficult class, give them that opportunity. I talked to a parent at a special education event in Petersburg a few years ago, and she was telling me about her son who wanted to take a foreign language class. He was in special education, and he had some deficits, and she was terrified in him taking the class. And I said, what's the worst thing that can happen? They can fail the class. That's the worst thing that can happen. They can fail the class. That's the worst thing that can happen. But for that child, just giving the opportunity to take the class and try is extremely important. And she said, she was just in fear of this, and even the school was, and the kid ended up getting an A or a B in the class. And that's because they wanted to do it. And if we put kids in positions where they can do things that they want to do, trust me, they'll be a lot more motivated. But instead of putting them in a position of doing things that they feel like they have to do, or mom said I have to do this, or my teacher said I need to do this, and they don't really have any buy-in, they're not going to put forth that effort. When you can find a way to give their kids some buy-in, trust me and believe they will go above and beyond to do the work that they need to do. Also, using the strengths-based approach to increase self-efficacy and self-esteem. Self-efficacy is very important. Kids need to know that they are capable of completing tasks or, completing various things. And I talk a little bit about that when I, talk to teachers. It's putting kids in position to win, putting them in positions to solve problems, to complete tasks. And it doesn't have to be a huge test, give them a small task. I talked to a parent and, our son had autism and he was always really big on planning stuff and organizing stuff. And that was his focus. That's what he liked to do. So she allowed him to organize a family trip. He organized it all the way down to the taxi pickup. I mean, just very minute details that most people overlook. But he was so organized that he planned that trip and she gave him that opportunity to do that. But finding out what your kids' strengths are and putting them in that position to do it. Also, getting involved in pro-social activities. I know COVID has really impacted that ability for kids to do recreational activity together. So, now it challenges us as parents, as educators, as organizational leaders to find out virtual ways for kids to socialize. I think socialization is extremely important, especially for kids with disabilities, because oftentimes you're more isolated than the average child. So finding those activities, helping them succeed in those activities are always good. And also time management is important. So my former special education teacher, when Jan invited me to do the presentation, I think last year the pandemic hit. I wanted to actually bring my special education teacher here, but with the pandemic and everything, I didn't want to put in that position. But I did plan to bring my dad and her when before the pandemic, when we were to meet in person, because those were two inspirational people in my life. And in the book, I dedicated to my special education teacher because she was extremely supportive. She was extremely encouraging. And even now as an adult, she came to my election day party I had on November 2nd. I invited her to my graduation. She couldn't come because she had another event she was attending, but she sent me this card in the mail. She also sent me a gift card to Target, which I used immediately. But I'll just read a little bit of this card. She says, "Your commencement announcement was such a wonderful joy to receive. As a matter of fact, it has become a little rumpled because I've been carrying it with me since I received it and showing it to anyone and everyone. I'm so very proud of you, not surprised, but very proud. It was certainly a pleasure and an honor to teach you." I can't read all that at the top, but to learn with you. We learned a lot together, didn't we? You've already made a difference with your life. I have every confidence you will continue to do so as you move on with your life journey. God bless you and your family. Your humbly proud teacher, Ruthie Toby. This is from 2014. And the one thing that I think is really cool about her is that she always talks about how much she learned from me and how much I learned from her. And I think that's an important thing. I gotta go backwards. Okay, it's working now. There you go. All right. So she always talks about how much we learn from each other. And I think as a therapist, I learned it a lot because, from the clients I work with, I learned so much from them that it helps me become a better student, a better educator, a better therapist, and also a better parent. But these 2 pages in the book, were important to me because when I came to special education class, this was around I was in special education starting in 3rd grade, but it wasn't until middle school that I started to realize that, I'm different than my peers, that I learned differently, and that special education didn't have a really great reputation amongst other students. So I was a little timid going into her classroom, but she made me feel comfortable. And by the end of 7th grade, her class for me was almost like a sanctuary because she was the one teacher in school that I could say that really understood what I was going through, who really understood who I was and really saw that potential and told me that. And I truly believe in people, planting seeds in the people by uplifting them, finding out what their strengths are, challenging them in that area, but also, giving them that support. And on the second page, it says, you can do it. I wanted to ask my illustrator, I said, could you put a illustration that represents like rock climbing or belaying in there? Because I see teachers as like people that support people who are climbing rocks, where they stand so they're at the bottom and they hold the rope to support the person as they climb up the mountain. And I think for her, she sort of provided that support that gave me that freedom to challenge myself. Once I left her program, I thought that I was able to conquer high school without special education services. And I felt I was able to, take on the world. And, I think that's how educators, should be. They should really enhance the students' education experience and really encourage them and make them feel like they have that ability to do all of the right things. And there's a quote from Maya Angelou that I like. It says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think for her, that was extremely important. I can't remember the lessons that she taught me in 7th and 6th grade. I can't remember, any really fine details on what went on, but I always remember how she made me feel, how she continues to make me feel today. And I think, if it wasn't for her support, not only would I not, had the motivation to finish school or to finish college, but even running for local politics. And I think and this is for parents and teachers and anybody who's supporting the students, that the more you help improve their self-esteem and their confidence, the more they will strive to do more, because they know that they can do it, because they know they have people that support them and then cares about them. So I talked about the ninja piece. That was, again, when I talked about the ninja, it's really about sort of that hiding that shame and that vulnerability. And I wanted to illustrate it to indicate that in the book, because a lot of students who are in special education, or even students who've experienced trauma, they carry a lot of vulnerability and a lot of shame and a lot of disbelief and a lot of negative things within themselves, and they try to hide those things to the world. I do want to show a video. So when I graduated college in 2014 with my master's of social work degree, I honored my former teachers. And this is just a little bit about my presentation to my former special education teacher. This is was my 6th and 7th grade resource teacher. I remember hating one of her classes. It wasn't a way to solve but this told at a time in my life when I felt small, this told me to feel really big. See, I believe in the presence, power, and very deep, and I think for another education, see the education. So before giving people their flowers was a thing, I was doing that in 2014. And I wanted to honor my former teachers, because for so long I had such a negative reaction towards the teachers I had, because I had some really bad teachers in the past. They weren't bad at teaching content, but they were really bad empathizing and understanding students with disabilities, or students who are minorities, or students who just needed a little bit of extra support. But when I reflected, I was like, man, I had some really awesome, amazing teachers too. And I really wanted to make sure that I highlighted a few of those teachers, like Mrs. Toby and like, the others who attended the event. So what can teachers do? If there any teachers in the chat, just let it be known. I did want to make the presentation not only relevant to parents and students, but also relevant to any teachers who may be chiming in. So what can teachers do? Provide early and effective education interventions. I feel like the earlier is always the better. Develop an inclusive learning environment that helps best students maximize their strengths. If inclusion was a thing back then, I would have loved it. I did not like to be taken out of my class to go to a classroom with other students. It was supportive because I could, test in a quiet environment. But I felt like, I just felt other. I just felt that, taking me out, it didn't really address all of the issues. It just maybe addressed some of the issues. Educating children about their learning and attention issues and empower them to self-determine. So giving the kid a little bit more of an idea of what their disability is can really help them work through it, to name it. When after I finished publishing Nelson Beats the Odds, I struggled with poor handwriting my entire life. And it wasn't until I worked with understood.org, and I'm going to show a video that they did a few years ago for me. They described the issue as dysgraphia. And I didn't know that. Here I am in my 30s just learning that this poor handwriting with this chicken scratch has a name. And my school didn't name it on the IEP. They didn't name, that. They just said poor writing, grammatical skills, disorganized writing. They used all of these descriptive words, but they didn't have a name for it. And sometimes when you give parents a name for something, they can look it up, Google it, WebMD it. They can do different things to educate themselves on it. But if you can't name something, nobody really has any idea what it is, how to get support for it. And you just think there's something wrong with my child without really knowing exactly what it is. So trying to naming it for a child kind of gives the parent and also gives the child some area where they can inform themselves about it. So support them in overcoming the stigma. Special education service already addressed that. Assist the students in developing a supportive home and school environment, which is really important. A lot of times, the only time a teacher may talk to a parent is at an IEP meeting. That should not be the only time and place they should have that access to a parent. And that relationship should have been established when that kid got in, whatever grade preceded that one, and that their parent and that teacher are having communication throughout the year, not just a few times a year. Creating opportunities for success is important, and also advocating for yourself and for your students. When I talk to special education teachers, they always feel other too. So not just the kids that feel other, sometimes the teachers do. And sometimes the special education teachers have to take on a lot of responsibilities. And I think inclusion gives them even more responsibilities because they're not just, oftentimes they're used not just for those special education students, but sometimes for the general ed students. But it's important for you all to advocate for yourself and what your needs are. And also, for your students, because a lot of times teachers aren't always, especially like the general education teachers, they aren't always informed about various disabilities or have an understanding or education about it. So sometimes your advocacy work, your education towards those teachers can really help the students experience. So my village, I do truly believe that it takes a village to raise a child, especially children who have challenges. And this is the picture on the top left is of me and my family. On the top right is a picture of me, my wife, 2 kids, now it's 3. Actually, the little one was in the belly at that time. Now she's 4 years old. So it just shows you how old that picture is. And then the bottom left is me, Miss Toby, and 3 other teachers that I had in school. And I actually seen 3 of them within the last 2 weeks because in my small town, a lot of teachers retired and I'm still there. So I really get a chance to still see them at Walmart or Food Lion. And we still get to chat and just, talk about the good old days. And then my friends are in the bottom right-hand corner. And again, that social support, having friends is really important, especially friends who are doing well. So with me, I tried to align myself with people who are doing better than me at that time, kids who were where I wanted to be or where I envisioned myself. And it really challenged me to do that, to do better, opposed to being with the kids who weren't really achieving much and who really weren't trying to go down the path that I was on. And sometimes as parents and as teachers, we have to intentionally do that because, when you're in special education, I had kids in the classroom who became class clowns or really great athletes to kind of shadow their insecurities or shadow their learning issues. And sometimes they won't necessarily align themselves with the people that could help them, but the people who are trying to strive because they get more comfortable and complacent in being a class clown or, being around kids who aren't always trying to do that. So sometimes you have to intentionally put your child in a certain position around certain people who want to do better as models so they can sort of show them how to, to do things. And the quote at the bottom says, recognize and honor the home in which a student comes from. That's a quote to educators and teachers. Not every kid comes from a great home. I was blessed to have two parents, but some kids have no parents. Some kids are in foster care. Some kids are raised by guardians. Some kids are raised by siblings. Not every kid is in the same situation, but you have to honor that person's home. I know with virtual learning, a lot of times teachers have had an opportunity to get glimpses into the homes of the kids, and you really see what these kids go through on a daily basis. But don't shame them for that. Don't blame them for that. They're trying to make do the best that they can through it. So coming of age, I have an old IEP right here at the bottom left-hand corner. I got that IEP when I was in college. I actually wrote a paper on the Individuals with Disabilities Act because I was really curious about special education. I didn't really know a lot about it as a former student. So in college, I wrote a paper so I could go back and educate myself. And I went back to school and I received my old IEPs and I was reading through them. And I saw that I was classified as learning disabled. And to me, it was like almost a punch in the face because here I am in college. I have a 3.0 GPA and I had this paper telling me that I'm learning disabled. And it really educated me about language and how language can be triggering and how language can sort of create realities for people that may not always exist. So I am really conscious of the language that I use. And I love understood.org because they don't say learning disabled, they say learning and attention issues. And I think that's an important umbrella to put it under because, these aren't disabilities of issues. And issues can be managed, there can be some solution, there can be a way around an issue. But when you say someone is disabled, sometimes a disability can be viewed as a permanent thing that there's really no type of way to approve that. So again, as parents, as educators, you can do it as you must, but I think the language that we use can sometimes shape a kid's mind or shape a kid's future. So just be mindful of that. I do want to show this quick video. Understood.org did because it really gives you a glimpse into my family, my mother and father, including the video. My mother passed away about 4 years ago. But again, I honor her, everything that I do, I honor her, and she's included in the video, and also my former teacher. My name is Ronnie Sidney. I'm from Pastoral Virginia. Issues that I struggle with is handwriting and reading. The part of school that I like was parts when I was allowed to be creative. What I struggled with was really handwriting, so writing notes. It's almost like no matter how hard I tried to write, the more mistakes I would make in the first paper. I felt like the only person in the world. I really felt isolated. I felt vulnerable. Being Black, we always say that the word twice as hard. But being Black was really the word 3 times as hard. Why can't I do this? Why can't I be like everybody else? I think for any adolescent, it's always about being like everybody else. Not only did I not feel like everyone else, but I had this label saying, you're not like everyone else.
I was a good mom. I was my baby, nothing wrong with it.
You need to have some type of special guidance. And once you got the elementary school and middle school, you begin to get the type of guidance you need.
The very first thing you noticed about Ronnie was he was an excellent talker, and he could always express himself verbally, not so much on paper. One of the things that I noticed right away was that he was obviously very intelligent and frustrated because he had trouble showing that in the ways that he needed to in school. Oh, this looks familiar, huh? This looks familiar. This is the old place. We spent a lot of time here. He was hiding that he was coming to the special education class.
I had to find a way to stay hidden. I had to find a way to become invisible. And the best way, and only way I knew how was to go to class really late
or go to class really early.
I had no idea that Ronnie was fighting the special ed stigma so much at that time.
I would say writing became a love of mine when my friends started to see that I had some pretty good MC skills. They started saying, man, you know, that's a pretty good, you know, rhyme there. And I had English teachers giving me really good feedback on my papers when they could read them. 11th, 12th grade is probably when English, music, hip hop, all sort of fused together and really pushed me into, you know, wanting to write more. This one really, you know, I have a really grow up, I write these lessons.
You always get a hot look.
I went to Old Dominion and a business management major. But while I was there, I always had a passion working with kids. So I started volunteering in Portsmouth, Virginia, North Virginia, working with kids, working with high school students interested in going to college. I changed my major to human services and I fell in love with it. For me, it was very surreal to work with kids who experience under 10 challenges. I did really, that was my passion. Now I'm a professional speaker, and I think a lot of kids who struggle academically, who have disabilities, have strengths, and a lot of them just need an avenue to go down to realize that strength. When Nelson Beasley, I was actually inspired by my former special education teacher. I really went in depth in terms of my experience in special education and decided to tell my story, but also to tell the story of all special education students, so all struggling students. You are the only person who experienced this. People have experienced and went to the NFL, or became actors, or became social workers. So you can do it too. My parents were, you know, encouraged me, and they told me that I was smart, and they told me I was smart. And I think until you're smart, you start to believe it. And I think, you know, kids have actually support having others, you know, sort of see their value and see their work, and they're all encouraging them. And really, the one that's the kids is really strong with that.
So it's really an honor to have been Ronnie's teacher. And I always like to say that, you know, Ronnie Sidney is my teacher, and I'm learning so much from him.
All right, so I do want to give a shout out to understood.org. It's a website that I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with it, but it's a great resource for parents, teachers, community organizers, just about various learning and attention issues. They have everyone on there that you can Google it. They have a Twitter stream that gives updates on workshops. It's a wonderful free resource. They have a ton of videos of various people who experience those different learning and attention issues and have achieved some level of success. And one of them actually invited me out to Oakland. She was a comedian, but she had a speech impediment. And she stuttered, and she became a comedian. So, you know, there's no limit to what kids with, who have whatever disability or learning and attention issue or physical impairment they can do. You can be anything. You know, as far as, you know, just being able to understand that, you know, you have gifts, you have strengths, and being able to operate on those. So this meme became really popular, and I would say about 80% of the opportunities I've been able to get over the few years have really been related to this one picture. And the picture went viral on Reddit, and it was one, and I believe it did because there's so many people out here, parents, kids, who've had this experience, who've sort of been an underdog, but have been able to accomplish, you know, various things throughout life. And I like this quote by C.S. Lewis. It says, "Hardship often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." And when I was writing Nelson Beats the Odds, I wanted the cover to look like a superhero because I always believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And I wanted to make sure I included my parents and my teacher because, you know, when you have those supports, it really empowers you to do those extraordinary things. And, you know, again, that was one of the purposes for this presentation because whoever's watching is a champion to someone, whether it's to your child, whether it's to your students, whether it's to your community, whether it's to a relative, you know, but you all are champions. And sometimes champions get a little weary. So I want to talk a little bit about some self-care items that you can do. So issues faced by today's youth. So not just kids who are dealing with various disabilities or learning and attention issues, but there's so many other things that kids have to face on top of that. So you have some kids dealing with poverty and homelessness. I worked with the Reach Easter Seals home in Woodbridge for 2 years, and it was a crisis home. So anyone who came into the home had some type of issue that they were dealing with. And the main one was homelessness. You know, they didn't have a home to stay at because whatever they did at that particular place they stayed before caused them to lose housing. So that was a huge issue. Psychological, physical, I put psychological twice, trauma, drug and alcohol use, mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And that has been increased throughout the pandemic due to the isolation issues. Undocumented immigration status. I currently work at a detention center for, ICE detainees. And what I've seen is that is a huge issue. I'm sure in Woodbridge and throughout the Northern Virginia area, a lot of kids are sort of not coming for support because they don't have their immigration status is in limbo, and they're afraid that they may get separated from their parents or something may happen. So a lot of kids, it's almost like a shadow community within the community that a lot of kids are having to deal with. Gender identity issues, bullying and peer pressure, exceedingly high expectations, COVID-19, which is putting some kids' lives at risk, and some educators and parents. And some parents have had to keep their kids home and are continuing to keep their kids home throughout the pandemic, which means that they aren't always getting a lot of support from the schools or educational institutions. And it's causing some kids to feel isolated, and it's causing some parents to experience burnout. Breaks in the continuity of learning in healthcare, changes in routine, and miss significant life events. So just imagine that can be one kid going through everything on this list, on top of having a learning and attention issue. So, these issues are significant, and none of them are to be understated. All of them are equally, could be equally distressing for a child. So there's a thing called ACEs, which talks about adverse childhood experiences, and there's a quiz that you can take online. And what they found is that the majority of people have dealt with at least one of these traumas that's on the left-hand side. So when you have these traumas in conjunction with a disability, a learning and attention issue, it can make life very difficult. And what they found is that the more of these traumas that you experience, the more impact it has on your life outcome. So people who experience having a drug-addicted parent, who've been sexually abused, abandoned, that may cause them to experience higher level of alcohol and drug use, incarceration. There's a variety of different impacts that they can have. And I would encourage you all to research adverse childhood experiences, take the ACEs survey, and also obesity and other health-related issues. So there's a book written by, I think his name is Ivan Vanderpool, and it talks about how the body experiences stress, and how stress is not just something that we experience psychologically, but it can manifest in high blood pressure. It can manifest in high cholesterol and various other health issues. So on the right-hand side, I talk about ways to help students build resilience, promote self-reflection through literary essays and discussions about resilience, help students develop self-regulation skills, which for me was extremely important. Having ADHD, it's almost like having a car with no brakes. So, but over time, I developed some brakes. I'm still struggling a little bit. I got like one brake on, still missing another. But having those self-regulation skills can really help a kid be able to retain what they're learning and really help them have a better quality of life. Build healthy relationships with parents and students, provide authentic evidence of student academic success, connect students to the right peers, services, and activities, provide concrete support for students in times of need, and be the one caring adult in your student's life. And the book I have, this is Tamika's new dress, which Tamika is actually a really gifted student. However, she's going through a lot of traumatic things in her life. And her grandmother, she has to live with her grandmother for a while. Her grandmother sold this new dress. it really makes her feel good about herself, and she's able to stand up to her bullies and to deal with some of the trauma that she dealt in her life. And sometimes kids need sometimes external things to help them internally. So I remember in school, I used to have low self-esteem, and I used to always ask my mom to buy me expensive shoes. And I would rather be known as a kid with expensive shoes over being known as a kid who had a ringworm or a kid who had a learning disability. And eventually, when people started seeing, oh, you got really nice shoes, you got really nice clothes, it sort of helped my confidence grow. And I wasn't focusing on some of the negative attributes about myself. So, you know, if a kid has a favorite shirt or favorite shoes or whatever they have that's favorite that gives them a sense of confidence, allow them to wear it, you know, because it's difficult. You know, that could be a shield for them. It could be something that can help them feel a little bit better about themselves, a little bit more confident. Other kids can see it and say, hey, man, that's pretty cool. And they can feel accepted. But you don't have to overdo it. I know when I was in school, you know, shoes were a little bit cheaper than they are now. That shoes could be like $300. So, you know, I don't want you to jump completely off the cliff, but, you know, maybe find some affordable things that, you know, that kid can get some confidence from. So parent self-care and resiliency checklist. So the one thing about, you know, I like about art, PCs, I'm determined, and various other programs is that they give parents an opportunity to be with other parents going through the same thing. You know, and I also recognize too that self-care is extremely important. You know, working with Easter Seals, the REACH program, you know, I didn't work on the line, the crisis counseling line. I worked at the home where individuals, adults dealing with crisis came to. But, you know, you could, when we would do our weekly staff meetings, you know, you could hear just from the counselors that some of the desperation, you know, some of the fear, the uncertainty in those parents' voices, and just really not knowing what to do. Because who will really know what to do if your kid is attacking you, if they're having a meltdown where they're breaking out windows in the home, or, you know, destroying the walls. And sometimes parents get burned out, and, you know, sometimes parents realize they need a lot more support and assistance than, you know, they thought they did, you know, previously. I will tell parents now, the one thing that I did learn about that experience is that it's important for you all to start preparing for life after school or life after graduation, because it can look really different than what their kids is experiencing now, and not to wait until 12th grade to start preparing for the transitioning, but start preparing now. And I think that art and other organizations in your community can really help give you some guidance and support around that. Because I've seen parents who are unprepared for that. And when it happens, it can be like a train wreck. So start preparing for that now. I'm not going to go over all of these tips or activities, but I do want sort of to squeeze to the right and just talk about self-care activities. I've heard people talk about being unable to pour out of an empty cup. And as parents, you know, I've heard parents of kids with disabilities talk about the war or the battle that they have with the schools. And, you know, I hate when a parent has to feel like they have to battle the school for resources, or battle the school for them to follow the IEP, or battle the school for this and battle the school for that. Because I know in battles, people get worn down. And the schools have much more resources to wage long rewards than parents do. Because not only are you helping to manage this one child, but you may have other children. You may have a job, you may have a spouse, you may have other responsibilities, but waging in a battle against the school could take up a lot of time and also energy, and you can feel drained. So make time to relax, you know, drink water, eat healthy, exercise, you know, use your sick leave at work if you haven't probably already used it up. You know, with the pandemic, a lot of people working from home were already exhausted that. But the last one, seek mental health or respite services. Please definitely look into that. I've met some extremely strong, durable parents who are going through a lot, but I don't really hear a lot of them talking about having a counselor, having support. So it's important that you do that because if something happens to you, I've known that working at a crisis home, when something happens to the parents, a lot of those kids end up in the system. So if you worry yourself to death or you end up in a situation where you have a mental health crisis, it can have a tremendous impact on your child. So, make sure you take care of yourself, seek support, don't engage in battles. I remember one of my teachers gave something to when I was awarded into my special education teacher. She used to always tell me in school, she said, choose your battles wisely. There's some things that aren't worth going to all out war against, and there's some things that are, but choose it wisely, use discernment. And then just some things on this side. So I will just end with this. I am enough. Parent, I know sometimes as parents, even as students, as teachers, as community resources, sometimes we don't feel like we're enough, but we are. We're prepared. With me, I went back to college to get my master's degree because I didn't feel like I was enough at that time to do what I wanted to do. But I realize now that even at that time, in that moment with that family, I was enough. And I think we have to realize that we are enough to deal with the responsibilities and things that we have to deal with. And this presentation is also available. You can, I'll make sure I leave it with Jan or you all can share it in the chat. But you can access it anytime you want if you wanted to read the slide a little bit more thoroughly. So misconceptions about learning and attention issues. I was actually featured in a book about twice exceptional students. And it was an honor to be in there because this is something that I had heard about until a few years ago. So twice exceptional students are intellectually gifted children who have some form of disability. So there are a large group of kids who are diagnosed, whether it's a physical impairment or mental impairment, or learning or attention issue, but they have extremely gifted in other areas. So I really want people to know that this group does exist because sometimes the stigma of whatever issue they have oversizes their gifts and their strengths. And sometimes those kids who have those gifts fall victim to the shame and stigma associated with their challenges. But I want to make sure that those kids aren't missed. There's a quote, not to throw the baby out with the wash water. And I think sometimes that happens. We throw out the gift with the challenge that the kid has, and we end up losing the whole child, and we lose all of the wonderful gifts that they can give to the world because we dismiss them because they have a challenge. Some parents think that learning and attention issues can be caused by a poor diet, vaccination, or too much television. Research has found that it's not true. Lack of parent or teacher involvement in early childhood can cause learning and attention issues. Research found that it's not true. The child is being lazy sometimes, but that's not true in all cases. And also education around these issues on parents with information they need to best support their children. And some parents also feel like it's their fault that their kid is in whatever situation that they're in. And generally that's not the case. And I think that internalization of that sometimes causes parents sometimes to be extremely critical of themselves and critical of others. I had a colleague who was in therapy with their family, and the parent thought that they were the reason their child had ADHD because they experienced it as an adult, and the man broke down crying in the session. And when we hold on to that, we feel like it's our fault. It's a really hard and large burden to carry. And I would say in the majority of cases, it's not, the parent's fault. And, when we punish ourselves for something that is not our fault, it can be a disservice to the people who need us the most. So I just wanted to share that tidbit. So I developed this particular slide because especially parents who may be minority parents or first generation parents or parents who really don't understand special education services, when they are approached with it, it can sometimes be a blame thing. They could feel blame, they could feel shame, they could feel, why are you classifying my child as this? They're not this, and there could be this resistance to accepting the services. when the service could actually benefit the child, but there can be some issues that the parent has dealt with. Some parents have been in special education, they've had negative experiences, and they never want their kids to ever go through those experiences again. So sometimes how you approach services to a family can really change the way that the family accepts it or perceives it. So this is sort of for educators. Remember, individuals and families are experts, educators are seen as consultants. So, don't come to a parent as if you know everything about their child when you only spend a few hours a day with them. Parents spend majority of the time with the child. They know their child inside and out. And at the end of the day, they are the expert of their child. They are the ones who are the primary guardians and custodians of the child. So when you have them in a situation, don't make them feel like they're uneducated. Don't make them feel like they aren't the expert. Don't make them feel other. You really want to have them sort of being in a leadership role, and you as an educator being seen as a consultant. Also having mutual respect, joint decision-making, sharing of feelings, flexibility, and honesty in dealing with each other is extremely important, especially the mutual respect, because some parents may may deal with the person in an antagonistic way because they feel like this is how they have to be in order to get things done, when it's really not that intention, but because of previous experiences, this is the way that they feel like they have to be to accomplish their goals. So you can't always fight fire with fire. Sometimes you have to be the fire extinguisher, because when you can work on the same page and work together with the family, it can really help the child. And as a therapist, the one thing that I was taught early on is that the child is the most important person in the process. So if I'm working with a parent and our discussion is not around helping the child, then we're doing a disservice. So as long as you make the child a center of whatever issue, decision that you're making, or you're making it clear and known that your best interest is with the child, it can really help improve their relationship with the parent. But when it's about everything else but the child, then you will see the things from the parent come out. But if you make the child a focus and the parent feels like you're sincere in helping this child, you will have the best relationship with that parent, possible. There will be some exceptions, but majority of the time, you will have a good working relationship with them. Be knowledgeable and well-informed about service resources available. So the ARC, great resources, PC, great resources, I'm determined, great resources. There's regional programs, great resources. The school may not be able to assist parents in every single issue that they have, so refer them out to various community resources. The Reach Eastern Sales Program is another resource. So make sure you're informed on the resources and that you can lend or lean on those resources to help provide a more holistic approach to the child. Connect individuals and families to others with similar experiences. Now that's extremely important. And I really miss having this being at the schools because parents had a chance to interact during the conferences, and now they can interact, of course, through Zoom and through chat, but they had to physically interact with each other. I think coming every year, I think people started building bonds and started making friendships and building friendships, and I'm sure they probably still stay in contact with one another, because it's good to know that you're not the only person going through this, and that there are other people going through it, and they may have some things that work for them that may not work for you, or you may have something that works for yourself that may work for. So it's good to share those resources and share those experiences. Maintain consistency and follow up in a timely manner. Time is valuable to everyone, for the teachers and also for the parents. Parents have a lot of things that they have to deal with. So making sure that when you have that time together, that you're using it in a respectful manner. Also focus on the individual's best interests and focus on what's right, not who's right. And I want to underline that, but I can't. But I really want you all to do that. Focus on what's right, not who's right, because that's a lot of battles is dealing with that. And sometimes even being right is not even important. It's about what's in the best interest of the child, not who's right or wrong about whatever issue. So Josh Shipp, he's another individual that has some really cool videos on social media. And he was in foster care, and he talks a lot about his experience. And his story sort of inspired me to create this presentation. And he says, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. And he talks about the caring adults that he had in his life and how he was able to overcome the trauma and abandonment that he experienced as a child, to become a successful, professional speaker. And he says the difference between the statistic and the success story is you. So I do want to sort of start, I'm not closing quite yet, but I want you all to remember that is that you, whether you're the parent, you're the teacher, you're the guardian, you're the community member, you make a difference in your child's life, and your effort. When I was working at Painesville Correctional Center, and I was doing this fatherhood class, I had two of the guys were sort of conversing, and one guy, he was upset because, being in prison, you don't make a lot of money working in the kitchen. So when birthdays come around, kids want bikes and they want this and want that. You don't always have the money to contribute to that. And one of the guys was talking about how his daughter was upset with him. And she kind of, she didn't curse at him, but she kind of made her frustration known over the phone. And one of the guys stepped in and said, we're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. And I do want to leave you with that, because as parents, a lot of times we feel like we're responsible for how our kids turn out, and that's a huge burden to carry, because sometimes it's like a flip of the coin. You don't really know how your kid will turn out, but we are responsible for the effort that we make, the effort that we put in, whether it's coming to the workshops, whether it's making sure our kids' IEP is being followed correctly. We're responsible for the effort. Now, the outcomes, we don't have as much control over that, but we do have control of the effort that we put in to help our kids, succeed. Now I'll step off my soapbox. When I was doing this presentation, I sent out some things to Mrs. Toby, and I wanted to sort of write down some things that worked for me as a student to help me overcome the challenges that I had. And some things I learned from her is that it takes a village. The student-parent-teacher relationship is important. Student, parent, teacher, not parent, teacher, teacher, student, student, parent, teacher. In that order can help, kids succeed. Learning is a mutual exchange. So just as much as you learn, so when I work with clients, just as much as they learn from me, I hope, well, just as much as I learn from them, I hope they're able to learn from me. Learning goes both ways. Respond to a student's need instead of reacting to their behaviors is extremely important, because some kids need attention. I was an attention-seeking person in school, and from my peers. And now I ran for politics, and I was still seeking attention. Unfortunately, I didn't get enough attention because I didn't win. However, as parents and even as teachers, some kids have needs, and we can't always react to behaviors, especially if you have a child who's nonverbal. A lot of times behaviors are how they communicate. You don't want to reinforce bad behaviors. You want to reinforce, good behaviors. And when you want to respond to a person's need, and I learned a lot about that working at the Reach Crisis Home. If someone, as one gentleman, one person we had who, he had issues toileting, and when he got, when he couldn't toilet the way he wanted to, he would go on a rampage. But we understood that, okay, he's starting to drum up. Maybe he can't toilet. Maybe we need to give him suppository. Maybe we need to do something to get his bowel moving, because he's unable to tell us, I need to toilet. But he could show us. And we didn't want him to show us because he was a big guy. People could get hurt. So we had to see, okay, this is what's going on. There's no need to chastise him, because we know this is what happens when this isn't, working. So, being attentive to the different ways that people are trying to express themselves, because a majority of communication, I forgot the percentage, but I think it might be like 80% is nonverbal. So, for those who don't have any verbal, nonverbal is the way that they communicate. So we need to respond to that and not overreact. Being firm, fair, and consistent. I learned that also by working at the prison. A lot of officers would say, we use this, being firm, fair, and consistent. Consistency is huge. Being firm, but also fair is really good. Even in school, the most strict teachers were sometimes students' favorite, because they had that firm, fair consistency. When you came in that classroom each day, you knew what to expect. You knew what the guidelines were. You knew where the boundaries were. And sometimes having boundaries provide kids with comfort and support. So as educators, as parents, that's really important, firm, fair, and consistent. And that's the way that you teach people. I always say you teach people how to treat you. And having that firm, fair consistency is a great tool to use. Current relationships transcend age, race, and gender. As you see, that's me and Mr. Toby. We don't look alike. There's nothing really much. We don't have a lot of commonalities physically, culturally, gender-wise. But she loved me, I love her, and that relationship is all that matters. You know, again, it's all about how you treat people. And when children have a really great, they sense people, especially kids I notice who have various disabilities, whether it's autism, whether it's kids who have Down syndrome, they're really perceptive and pick up on a person's energy, pick up on how people, you know, you don't have to say anything. They can just pick up on you immediately, whether or not you care about them or the type of person that you are. But developing that current relationship is extremely important. Provide safe spaces for vulnerable youth. What makes the biggest difference is how you make students feel. Again, that goes back to my Untitled quote. You know, if you make a student feel good, they're going to behave good. If you make a student feel like they're able to conquer the world, they go conquer the world. There's kids who will run through walls for their teachers. And there's some kids who won't even want to deal with a teacher. So it's all about your approach to what you want to do. And this is what Ms. Toby said when I asked her to include some things. So what I learned from Ronnie and my other exceptional students, she said relationships, relationships, relationships. And she had a good relationship with my dad. And I think that helps. You know, when you have a relationship with a student, the parents, because sometimes students will try stuff, but I know back in the day, you know, the parents called the parents when something was wrong. They sometimes went to the parents' home, they went to the job. You know, they made sure that they were able to say, hey, your kid is not acting, and parents held their kids responsible. I'm not going all the way. My parents held me responsible because they could get in trouble. So, but you know, that relationship is extremely important. Having a good relationship with your students, with your parents, with the parents are extremely important. She said, we have no clear idea of all that our students are facing. A lot of teachers don't. I think with Zoom, you have a little bit, but a lot of times with teachers, and even me, you know, being educated is a privilege. You know, coming from a two-parent home is a privilege. A lot of times people who teach or in positions of education, whether administration or in the classroom, they don't have the same experiences as the students they work with. So, you know, being understanding and knowing what your kids are going through, whether it's you talking to them, you going to the home, you going through their communities, it can give you more empathy and a better, clear understanding of what their kid is bringing with them each day when they come to your classroom. Because sometimes trigonometry isn't the most important thing on the kid's mind. So, you know, just being mindful of those things are important. We need to look beyond the behavior to the cause. And again, that kind of goes back to not reacting to behaviors, but sort of responding to what the kid wants. And, you know, that's the purpose of IEP meetings, is to kind of get the root of the cause, but just definitely looking beyond those behaviors. The struggles students are facing right now are just that, present struggles. They do not define nor predict the future. Now that's very philosophical right there. And it doesn't, you know, I would have been written off a long time ago if the person I was to become was that person who I was in 7th or 8th grade. And as kids I've met, adults I've met who were former special education students, who have become lawyers, who have become journalists, who have become, you know, extremely successful in their various fields. So whatever your child is going through now is not predictive of the person they may become in the future. Respect the student's home life and heritage, extremely important. Include students in decision-making related to their education and learning. Again, I emphasized that earlier. Number one job as a special educator, because consummate cheerleader, sure, you can do this. So not only do you have to wear a teaching hat, but you also have to have some pom-poms and cheerleading spirit. You know, you have to really motivate your kids, cheer your kids on. You know, even again, small successes, small victories, they matter. Maintain high standards and make it clear you expect your students to meet or exceed those standards. And Mrs. Toby told me that she said that what did she say? She said that she taught kids how to do life with their disabilities. She didn't cut slack, you know, she wasn't a teacher that just let you get around things. Or she taught you how to deal with life with whatever challenge you have. Because she knew once you graduate, a lot of times those challenges will still be there. But are you capable, are you able, do you have the resources and the tools to deal with life's adversity with whatever issue that you have? She said a disability is not an excuse, it's just a difference. And the last one is we'll figure it out together. So those were the words from my favorite teacher, the teacher of the millennium, of the decade, of the century. Mrs. Tobey, who was retired from education after like 40 plus years in various capacities. And now she's just worrying about her grandkids and loving on them. So this is my final slide, and it says, if you are a teacher, someday 50 years from now, someone will think of you and say your name. Let that sink in. So these are some teachers at the bottom who helped me throughout my journey. I had a chance to meet R.L. Stein a couple years ago, and it's crazy because that's the only book I really like to read when I was in elementary school was the Goosebumps books. But to be, and I actually spoke it, to be on the same program, to be in the same event, to share the same spaces, someone that you idolized growing up, to me, it kind of showed me how, you know, how I've elevated, you know, throughout my life and throughout my challenges. Huffington Post considered me one of the 15 Black male therapists you should know. Nelson Beats the Odds was a bestseller. Rest in Peace, Rashawn Reloaded won a book award and was also the Virginia Yaba Books was an honorary runner-up. So I was able to publish 7 books in total. And I didn't even like reading as a kid. You know? I was in special education because I struggled writing as a kid. So to become an author is almost surreal, but it's not something that I identified as a kid. I could have never predicted where I'd be at today when I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, 12th grade. 12th grade, I was terrified graduating school. I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I was going to do. And, you know, sometimes you just have to let kids figure it out. Sometimes you have to let kids find their own way. Because as parents, we have things that we want our kids to do. But if kids aren't buying into it or they aren't able to find their way, then it's almost just like going through the motions. So it's really important that we give kids that freedom to find their way. And just recently, Nelson Beats the Odds was on the banned book list. I don't know why anyone would ban Nelson Beats the Odds. It's just like, it's incredible. But there is a trend across the country to ban diverse books. But, you know, all they did was make my book more successful. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the York, Pennsylvania School Board for making my book even more successful by trying to ban it. And I wrote Nelson Beats the Odds for this exact audience because for so long, when I was in school, there were no books I could go to the library to pick up to see, not just myself reflected this, or there was positive about students with disabilities, because everything was so, you know, when you watch like, you know, Mickey Mouse movies or all of those old shows, it kind of made fun of people with physical disabilities or people with intellectual disabilities, or you watch movies. Even Steve Urkel was wearing glasses. I didn't want to wear my glasses in school because I didn't want people to call me Steve Urkel. So people with visual impairments, you know, society always found ways to make fun of those people. So, you know, for me, I wanted to write a book that was motivational, inspirational, and was honest, you know, about my truth and also the truth of others going through some of the similar things I've gone through, to let kids know that regardless of what you're going through, you can beat the odds, you can overcome the challenges, as long as you have the right supports in place, as long as you feel self-determined, as long as you feel motivated to do those things. So I'm going to end there. I'm really happy that 82 people, I saw like 89 earlier, but I'm really happy that each and every one of you decided to participate in the conference today. Please put your questions in the chat screen or the Q&A screen, because I am available to take some questions. But I really appreciate your time and your attendance, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ronnie, for sharing your story and presenting as our keynote today. We do have a few questions that have come up in our Q&A in our chat. And if anybody else has questions, please feel free to add them in. Our first question is, what if you have hit a wall with a young adult? Where do you recommend that I turn to?
Now, young adults, even as a therapist, I'm still scratching my head on how to deal with that. Again, I talked about it earlier. Sometimes young adults have to figure things out themselves, and sometimes we can't, again, always feel that we're responsible for every decision our young adults make. Because the one thing about young adulthood is that that's when you test things. That's when you're most rebellious. That's when you're trying to figure out your identity. So you're going to hit, as young adults, prayers were invented for young adults to hit walls. They're going to keep hitting them, and that's just a part of being a young adult. And I think sometimes that understanding and knowing that's a part of being a young adult can sort of help the parents sort of process and to take a deep breath and realize that, hey, they hit a wall, but mommy's here, daddy's here, your guardian's here to help you get up and, keep trying. Sometimes kids won't always talk to parents about everything. So sometimes they may need another support, a mentor, or a therapist, or someone in the community or in their home that they can have those conversations with. So I would say that's the best advice, is that young adults hit walls. Sometimes it's introducing intentional. Sometimes as a parent, we can be intentional about different things that we do, say. And I always say to my wife, sometimes she convinced me to do things without convincing me to do things. And sometimes with young adults, you have to convince them to do things without convincing them to do things. So I would say that's my best advice.
Thank you, Ronnie. Our next question begins with a thank you for your presentation, and continues on to ask, how important and valuable do you feel the relationship is for someone who lives with a disability with someone else who lives with a disability? What do you see the benefits being in that situation?
I think commonality. I think someone who you see every day that knows what you're going through. And again, sometimes it can be challenging because in life, there's always pecking orders. And even amongst groups of people with disabilities, there's still a pecking order. There's a conference that I'm determined puts on, and it's a conference they do in the summertime for African-American males with disabilities, which is a disproportionate group if you look at the education system. And they bring them all together for like a couple-day conference. And I went, and I was just sort of floored because some of the guys were teaching other kids who had disabilities. And I was like, why are you all picking on each other when you all are kind of in the same boat? And I think sometimes understanding that we're in it together can really help. But if it comes to a situation where you're comparing or, there's, instead of us focusing on our commonalities, we're focusing on our differences, I can see sometimes that being conflicted.
Thanks for answering that, Ronnie. Another question that we have is if you are planning on writing another book.
Yeah, so I've been writing this book for like 3 years, and I haven't. And always, for me, I'm not a person that just writes books. I'm sort of like driven or inspired to write. So I started writing a book about my mother when she passed away. It's called Gigi's Baby, and it's about her relationship with my daughter and how we sort of navigated the whole process of bereavement. And maybe this question is telling me I need to take the step a little bit further in the process. This is sometimes I believe God, the Most High, Allah, whatever you say, sometimes put different people, different things, different things happen in your life that sort of tells you that you need to do this. So I do take that as I need to go forward with this book and continue. So thank you for the question. But I would say that is my next book that I'm gonna write. And this is for younger kids, like 5, 6, 7 years old.
Thanks, Ronnie, and we're all looking forward to that. We have another question about virtual story times. Have you done them in the past, especially for kids that receive special education services? And would you consider doing this with Nelson Beats the Odds? Thanks for sharing your story and your time today.
Actually, no, I have not. That is actually a pretty good idea. I would be really interested in doing that. But I do have my book available, PDF. It's available. I have an app, Nelson Beats the Odds Comic Creator app, which is for right now iPhone, so you can download the app and actually read 2 of my books for free on there. Android, again, that's probably you telling me I need to make sure I get this on Android. So I do need to make sure I get the books on Android. But you can go to Amazon and you can download the ebook through their Amazon website. But I would love to do that. So I don't know who asked that question, but maybe we can coordinate that in the future. Maybe I can talk to Jan. Maybe it's something maybe we can do in the future. So that is actually a pretty good idea.
I agree. I think that would be a great opportunity. Our last question of the day looks like, how do you help a young adult who has some challenges and knows yet refuses to seek help?
Now that's a running up against the wall right there. I will say this. I had a lot of pride, and I think a lot of kids with special education, even though we might have a challenge, we got a lot of swag, we got a lot of pride. You know, I think having a challenge, you do feel like your back is against the wall, and you do have to be a really prideful person, because sometimes that's just what you need to get yourself through. And sometimes it's foolish pride, but it's that pride that helps you deal with some of the nuances throughout your experience. Again, suggesting things without suggesting them is a really, interesting way, using your resources. Because I think it's just like a bull. You don't want to stand in front of a bull waving a red flag. So you don't want to make it obvious that you're trying to help this person, because this person may not want help. Maybe they want something else. Or maybe you don't want to even look at it as help. Sometimes guidance is a good term. Sometimes finding other people. Because as a therapist, I've had parents say, I tell them that every day. But coming from someone else, sometimes it's different. So finding another person to sort of affirm or reinforce what you're trying to share with them is good. But even when a kid is not listening, they're listening. A kid can be the most, they can have their head down, acting like they're asleep, but their ears, if they can hear, are still working. So, just keep reinforcing that firm, fair, consistent, and the kid, they'll eventually understand and know that, that's what they're being expected to do.
Thank you, Ronnie. And it looks like we had one last question come in, so we'll wrap up with this question here. So in this situation, the mom shares that her son lost his older brother who had autism in 2016. The son is now in his first year of college, and his dad had moved to California for a new job. And the son has had some problems adjusting with all of these different changes. She is wondering how she can be supportive in that situation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually wanted to touch on it. Because sometimes those kids are sometimes sort of missed. So you may have a child with a various disability, and then you may have a child maybe more neurotypical. And sometimes a child with a disability may get more attention than the other child, or the other child may feel in competition. So for me, I had a sister who was like extremely bright, gifted, cheerleader. I mean, just somebody you put on a movie. And then you had me. And so there was like some jealousy there, and sometimes those kids sometimes are not always given the same attention. And sometimes those kids serve as caretakers for their sibling and are very protective and are very loving, and they build this really strong bond. And you mentioned that they lost their sibling. I mean, that's extreme, because when you're a caretaker, he probably had to get us some fights for his brother. So that was probably something that was a really close relationship. So for him to lose that person was probably difficult and challenging for him. And then, with the relationship with the parents, not working together. And sometimes going to college, believe it or not, is really good for kids, because they're taken out of all the stuff that's going on at home, and they're able to get away and focus on education, have a peer, support system, and various things going on. So him being in college, and if he's still there, that means he's able to adapt and do well despite all those things going on. I would just say have an open door policy, and just say, check in every now and then. but I wouldn't necessarily dwell on it because it may not be affecting them as much as you think, or it may be affecting them a lot, but just kind of checking in every now and then is good. But also allowing them to develop their own identity separate from everything that's going on is also good. So, you know, I think as parents, we have really good discernment to say when we need to step up and when we need to step back. I would say just use that and just check in every now and then. And not saying, you know, no checking and say, hey, do you miss your brother? Or, you know, are you thinking about what happened between, you know, at home? But just kind of just check in and say, hey, you know, how you doing? Is there anything that you need from me? Hey, I'm just saying I love you. I want to just check and see how your day is. Those types of things, because you just never know how a simple check-in can maybe lead them to maybe disclose a little more, or to just kind of just give you some feedback on how they're doing.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. And I know that I said the last two questions would be our last, but we did receive one last question.
We have time.
You know, they just keep rolling in after I say it's the last one, but I guess that's the joy of Zoom. You can't get a feel for what the room is. So this question says, you mentioned when you were in school, the inclusion setting didn't really exist to the extent that it does today. As someone that's overcome all those you can't moments, when you look back, what would have been most helpful for your teachers to do to wash out the fears and unknowns other children may have in the inclusion settings today?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say they could have done back then. That's a good question. I can't even see inclusion existing back then, just the way the schools, but I mean, because I think it was different too, because we didn't have the standardized testing. So teachers kind of have more freedom to do various things. I think sometimes the standardized testing, they kind of put in place some guidelines and some types of structure, which I think is good. I would say back then, if they had a teacher in the classroom, don't have the teacher hovering over the students that are in special education. Don't like make it so obvious. Don't put all 3 students right together. You know, spread them out. You know, have the teacher kind of seen as if they're like a co-teacher versus a teacher just for these 3 kids. You know, because some kids, again, that pride thing. You know, if they need someone to read out loud to them, they might not want the teacher reading out loud to them in front of 100 kids. But at the same time, it's good for the students, the neurotypical students, to see that there are some kids who have different supports. They're in our classroom, but they're doing the same work that we're doing. So I think that part of it was missed when they didn't have inclusions, because I'm not already worried about the special education students. I'm worried about the other students. Those were the kids I was worried about teasing me or joking on me, or it was really educated in that group. And I remember presenting my book at a high school, and one of the kids said, "Man, everybody in the school needs that book. Not just the kids, but everybody needs the education. Every student needs to know that every kid learns differently. And sometimes the students that aren't in special education have needs that they aren't getting addressed too. But them to know that, hey, not everybody learns the same. And because we don't all learn the same, these are different supports. This doesn't mean that this kid is dumb, or this kid is not capable of learning, but this kid needs a read along, or this kid needs extra time, or this kid needs to ask more specific questions. But I think that just makes a better society. Not when we put people in the closet or we usher people into a room where they're just around people who are like them, but when we sort of create a more diverse setting, more inclusive to all learners. I just think that's just better. So I don't know if I answered the question fully, but I think that's why I think inclusion is like extremely awesome, for that service to be available for individuals, because it's not just for the kids with disabilities. It's for those other kids who don't really understand and know. And I think ignorance sometimes creates stereotypes, and it creates these ideas about kids who are included. So the fact that they're included, it sort of dispels a lot of the different myths, and it makes those other kids feel a part of the educational setting.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. And thank you to everybody who submitted all of these questions. I think that they really started up a good conversation here. As we move forward, in the day, you'll be receiving an email here in the next few minutes that lays out everything else that you'll need to access the remainder of what we offer for this virtual conference, to include the recorded workshops, which are available in our conference portal for you. And you should be able to actually open each of those. And if you need closed captioning for any of those, know that that's available in those videos, as well as a certificate. If that's something that you are looking to download today, that'll be available in the email that'll be sent shortly. And we've also included a survey in that email. We value any feedback that you have to provide for us to improve this experience. So we do ask that you complete the survey. We also want to reiterate that the workshop should be available through the end of the year to allow you access to watch as many as you'd like, which is a benefit to having this virtually, that you have more time to review more information. So at any point, if you have questions in reviewing this content, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Kayla McDonald. My email is included in the email that's being sent out, as well as Jan Russell. And thank you for attending, and thank you to our wonderful committee for helping to make this happen. And again, thank you to Ronnie for being here today as our keynote speaker.
Thank you.
Yes, Ronnie.